All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Driving Show. My name is Matt, and this is our co host, Hans here. Hans, how are you doing?
Good.
Doing
How are you
very
doing,
good.
Matt?
Yeah, so we've had a little bit of a summer break, looking into our own car projects, in both of our home areas, and there's been a lot going on this summer with both of us, I think. So this episode, we're going to talk about what we've been getting into in our own garages and on the roads out near where we live. Both
Yeah.
projects and adventures, and yeah, I'm excited to catch up, Hans, because it sounds like you've had a lot going on with your car projects, and I know there's certainly been a lot going on here. So, yeah, can't wait to get into it.
Yeah. No, I'd love to hear about your car projects. I think you've been busier in the garage. I've been busy out driving on the road. So it's a bit of different content, but I love to hear about the work that
Yeah,
you've been doing. With fitting the headers and everything on on one of your cars. I'm very envious that you have. So I'd love to hear about the work. I mean, I've seen some pictures and things like that, and maybe we can insert some of those pictures. So what have you been up to with the number of
yeah,
cars you
absolutely.
have?
So, for those that don't know, I have a small fleet of cars here. Kind of old, mostly older BMWs, mostly older German cars. We'll just put it that way. And the one that I've been looking forward to getting back out on the road the most is my 2000 E39 M5 BMW. That car started undergoing some work late last summer, and then here in Michigan, the winter hits, and you kind of lose motivation to go out in the garage and struggle when the temperatures get down below freezing. So that, of course, sat over the winter, and I guess for context, before the winter last year, a friend of mine and I dropped the entire rear subframe because this car has it's higher mileage at this point, and the rubber bushings and things in the subframe were all original, and the differential bushings as well. And there was just a little bit of looseness there that. Typically, all used BMWs of a certain age that I've encountered need those things replaced, and so that's just one of those things I do when I get a car. And yeah, I've had this M5 for 3.5 years now. So, it's just one of those things where the actual parts themselves aren't expensive. It's really just a pain to get it all out because of the size and weight of everything. But decided last year that it was the time to tackle those things. So while I was in there, ordered the full spread of refresh components for all of the suspension. So, yeah, upper control arm links, roll bar links, all of the bushings for the lower control arms had to be pressed out and refit. Subframe bushings had to be pressed out, refit. Differential bushings, all of that stuff. So that actually got done last summer. We
It's like a new
Yeah,
car.
at least like that part of the car. When I first got the car, the first thing I did was redo the whole front, like steering and control arm and suspension up front. So that was already done. It was just time for the rear to get done.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything got done, including rear shocks, bump stops, all of that stuff, just to make it refreshed and new. And since you have to take the entire exhaust system down and the drive shaft out and all of that to drop the rear subframe, I was thinking like, there's got to be some other thing I can do to like kind of subtly enhance something about the car. And it just so happened at the time that there was a group buy going on at the forums for these nice tubular, like free flowing super sprint headers from Italy, which are normally pretty expensive, but this group buy had a big discount, so I went ahead and ordered those. And not really thinking how difficult it would be to install. But of course, um, you know, the way the E39 M5 is, it has a hydraulic steering box because the V8 in the front is so large. It doesn't have a rack and pinion setup like the rest of inline six E39s do. So basically, the steering box gets in the way of you being able to actually remove or install headers from underneath the car. So the front subframe then had to get dropped. So I started that last winter, and that's the point where I'm like, the whole car is apart. It's never going to be on the road again. You get that point in a project where you're just like, what have I done?
It's a
Yeah, and there's
parts
just like
car.
sitting on jack stands, and I'm like, will this thing ever drive again? So, um, yeah, that's how things started. And then once the weather started turning this year, I was like, all right, I'm really excited to drive this thing. It's going to be really nice with all of the new parts into it. So I called my friend who lives a couple hours away that likes to visit. And, we do automotive things together. I said, how would you like to come up and stay with me for a week? We'll get this knocked out. I'll provide the food and beverage. You come help me with this. And he was a former BMW tech. So, this is something that he's done many times before. So, luckily I got him to come up and we had a whole, bonanza of, you know, bonding and swearing at a BMW that was giving us problems. But ultimately, yeah, we got the headers mounted into the car, got the car to the exhaust shop so they could weld the headers to the rest of the exhaust system, and got everything put back in the car, drive shaft, and the rest of the exhaust system. And yeah, getting that car back on the road for the first time was a really good feeling. Just reuniting with it.
Yeah, it's a good mission
Yeah,
completed.
absolutely, and everything's just
It sounds
well.
amazing. I mean, the sound clips you sent me is like that is
Well, we'll
outstanding.
have to put that in the video here so you could see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll have to put it on or on
Yeah,
Instagram or
and that
something.
actually came a little bit later after it was already on the road, because it still had the factory E39 M5 mufflers, which are these quad muffler, quad tip. So each
Mm,
each tip has its own like tubular muffler section, and it does a really really good job of quieting all the engine noise down, which is amazing because if you're
yeah.
if you're driving around, you're driving this powerful car that's really capable, and your passengers like don't even really know, other than like when they look at the window and see the scenery going by really fast because it's that quiet. So I decided that I was okay with a little bit more noise, and I wanted to go with a little bit more of a sporty exhaust system. So I got an Eisenman. Race setup, they call it. They have a couple of different sound output options. One is just like a slight increase in volume but more of a change in tone. That's the sport, and then the race is considerably louder. But yeah, so I ordered this exhaust system, and that was actually really easy to fit. I did that myself in 45 minutes to an hour. So that was really nice to just be able to. I didn't even like jack the car up. I just like backed it up onto those like plastic wedge ramps, and just cut the old exhaust right around the rear axle, and put the new ones on, and they really do sound nice. So we'll put a clip of that in here so that you can hear it. Um,
Yeah, and do you have a is it a valve? It's a valve that opens between the sport and the race, or
it's not that fancy,
how does
unfortunately.
that work?
Yeah, so
It's
some of the
not.
new BMWs have that from the factory, where there's like an actuator that, and I think what
Hmm.
happens is it actually just bypasses the muffler, and so you just have like exhaust coming straight after the catalytic converters. It's just like getting dumped out, so it's super loud, right? Um, and
Yeah.
you can do that. There's some aftermarket options for that, which are pretty inexpensive. And I looked into that.
I know Valtronic does
Okay.
it for a lot of models, but I don't think they're inexpensive. There are probably some other models, but I just looked
Well,
at it
that's probably the
and
way to go, because the reason I ultimately didn't do that was because I guess I was kind of budget conscious, looking at all of this, and I was already thinking, like these mufflers themselves are over $2,000, and then if I'm gonna like add this valving system to like make it even louder or whatever, I'd be getting into dangerous territory on a car that's so old, and you know, um, yeah, probably not going anywhere value wise. So I um, I ultimately decided against the ones that are available, the kind of universal ones, which are really just the diameter of the exhaust pipe, You band clamp them in, and then they have a flap, and that flap has like an exit gate. But the actuators themselves don't look automotive grade as far as being sealed from the water. And a lot of the reviews I read,
Okay, so they'll
yeah,
get stuck
people
and
people had them
corroded and
failing
stuff.
after a
Yeah,
couple of weeks, and I was just like, I'm not interested in putting this on and then
yeah.
having it peter out. So yeah, but cars back on the
I,
road now.
I mean, also, like honestly, I had that on the Mustang from factory, on the GT350 that I had, and at that point, I think it bypassed the. So I took the what do you call it? The on the centerpiece of the pipe, you have
Resonators.
the one that resonator, yeah, that takes the
Hmm.
noise down. So I took that out because the R didn't have it, and then I got just straight from the headers all the way back, and then the mufflers
Hmm.
are at the end. And they had that kind of system where you had basically it went into two mufflers, I think is the way it worked, and then inside of the mufflers it would open like one of them like through a bypass thing. So one of them was basically a
Hmm.
straight pipe, and it would only open that if you put it in like race mode or
Okay.
sports
Yeah.
mode. If you were normal, all the exhaust gases I think would go out through the outer pipes. It was like going through the and then it was straight piped in the
Okay.
middle, something
Hmm.
like that. Oh, those just the mufflers in the back. Sorry, not the cats are in the
Hmm.
front. So it's just the mufflers. But I'm also now looking at it. It would be my next kind of major upgrade, probably in the winter at some point, on the
That would be
GT3
awesome.
on the Porsche, because it's
Yeah.
super quiet. The mufflers like take up. I mean, it's like a large suitcase
Yeah.
on each side. It is like a massive muffler, both weight and space wise. And I've looked at there. Obviously, there's a lot of, just like with BMW. There's a lot of different options you can go with, but they sound so much better because it is very muted. If you're not going like 6,000, where then it really starts to sound like amazing. But before then, it's very
Yeah,
quiet
it's
engine.
it's interesting. That seems like it was kind of the German automaker philosophy for sports cars in the 90s and 2000s. Are these like very
Hmm.
powerful engines that like sound great when they don't have a huge muffler, but like they have these massive factory exhaust systems that are heavy, and they're dampening 95% of the sound. And I saw
Yeah,
somewhere it was like an old BMW advertising, or it was like some sort of marketing pamphlet put out about a cars, and it was basically saying that like the Italian philosophy of exhaust design is to be boisterous and um, like something like buzzy or something like they were like trying to be nice about the way they were saying it, but like you could tell clearly it was like you're like that's not for us. Like we don't like that. We like quiet and refined and stuff like that. And I don't know. I think that's one of the cool things about the car community and aftermarket is that there's plenty of options out there to support your taste and vision for your modified vehicle. The only thing that's a little bit of an unknown is kind of where it comes to people's opinions, and then of course looking at videos online, through different generations of cameras and microphones and stuff like that. It's very hard to tell what the actual volume level is going to be um, in person a lot of the times, other than just kind of reading anecdotally through what people have to say. So um,
but what about like the what do you call it, drowning? When you're driving at a higher rate of speed, like on the
the
highway, like when you're
drone, yeah,
cruising at
droning.
like 60 miles per hour. Yeah, the drone. Yeah. What about that? Does that have you tested
Yeah,
that?
well, are you talking about
Because that's the only
the
drawback I
setup
would
on my
see.
car, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
on the
it's
M5.
so the crazy thing about this setup is it's definitely louder outside of the car, but I wouldn't say it's like I don't know, like super loud or super aggressive. There's lots of cars around Detroit that are way louder than this car, and pickup trucks and stuff like that. Most of the time, where
Hmm.
people just like cut stuff off and didn't put anything back on. But
Yeah,
yeah, for
that will
sure.
do it.
No, but this sounds really refined. I left the factory resonator in there, which is like it's basically that midsection pipe, like you were talking about.
Oh, okay,
And
you
in
did.
V8
Yeah,
engines, they have the two banks on either side where your four primaries are coming down, and then they go back towards the rear of the car as two individual pipes. And there is this like X tube they call it, where those two pipes converge for a short period of time,
yeah,
and then
X
cross
pipe.
back
Yeah,
out. And a lot of times, manufacturers will put a resonator on that to capture what is essentially a resonant frequency that corresponds with a certain RPM of the engine. So, like, say, cruising at 2,300 RPM, like the vibration and the length and the diameter of the pipe all kind of add to this physics equation where there's just going to be standing waves, and it's just going to make that like the crazy droning exhaust noise. And I decided to leave that in for the time being because I really didn't want the car to be like aggressively like kind of look at me, it's a loud car sort of thing. I wanted it just to sound a little bit sportier. So with the windows up, it really kind of
yeah.
it's still very quiet and you can barely hear it. It's only if you really get on the gas that you can start to hear the exhaust like kind of coming through the back, like the rear seat area. um, and I might I,
Yeah, no, I remember that. Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I might modify the X pipe at some point to get a a little bit different tone, but I would probably still go with a resonated one, just because I really don't want any drone. And yeah, I'm trying to think like cars from the factory that don't have resonators tend to have drone.
Yeah, the thing is, like, so for my Mustang, the GT350 I had, what I did is the regular one had the resonator just like you described it, where basically the X pipe was smaller, so it was basically it was very much like this, right? It's very angular,
Mm-hmm.
the X, and then they fit a resonator in. But the R model had a more free flowing
Mm-hmm.
X for the same space that the resonator and the X pipe from the regular one. So all you had to do is you didn't even have to weld it; it like just fit straight
Mm-hmm.
in there. So you just take the exhaust out, you just push in the X pipe, you take the resonator out and the old X pipe, and you have like a longer, more flowing X pipe. It did drone
Mm-hmm.
some, but the noise that flat crank
Oh yeah,
V8
you don't
made
care.
was
Yeah.
totally worth it. But if you're on the highway for like several hours and you're in sports mode, you could also it was really low when you put it in normal mode. But if you were on sports mode for several hours, absolutely there was
Yeah, and
drone
that's a
noise.
personal decision that everyone's free to make, right? Like I like you said, if you have a special engine with like a this character and the sound that you want to like free it up, absolutely. Like get rid of any restrictions. I think any sort of like drag race exhaust shop, like those sorts of places, they always tell you like the fewer bends you have, the less restrictions of flow, the better performance wise your exhaust is going to be. um
That's funny because the Porsche is like totally opposite to that. The whole
Yeah,
thing is like
yeah. It's
everywhere.
like it's a marvel. It's a packaging miracle, really. Yeah, looking at some of those Porsche systems, it might my head.
Yeah, like it comes down straight down first from the flat six, and then it like bends up, and then it crosses over uh, into the mufflers, and then no, there's a crossover before the mufflers, and as it goes out, then there's an X pipe, and then they go out the opposite ways.
Insane.
But it's like you can have less bends, but it's like it's crazy how much piping they fit in essentially behind the
Yeah,
engine.
absolutely, and that is not a normal car. I would say for exhaust design, when it comes to philosophy and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I'm sure if I took a car like that to one of these race exhaust shops, they would just be like, I don't know, you got to buy something for that, man. Like we can't have.
You just straight pipe it like the
Yeah,
old
there's that
Porsches,
too.
like the RS. where they just like collect it
It
together and
just
it's
yeah,
just a
just
straight
exit.
pipe out. It's basically like a beach
Dune buggies.
beach buggy
Yeah.
or whatever. The dune buggies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and like I guess that's where it comes to like the driver's opinion of what they want to hear it sound like, because if you're driving like a four-cylinder turbo car and you just take out any restrictions, any sort of resonators, mufflers, and you do a straight pipe, it's going to be loud, that is for sure. But are you really going to want to live with that sound every day? And like, do your neighbors want to live with that? Because I don't know. I remember I was I was working as an engineer, like from a supplying company on the Dodge Charger, Challenger, Hellcat family of cars, and I kept checking out these
yeah,
Hellcat red eye wide bodies to do some electrical testing on, and I lift like put these cars on the lift and stuff like that. And from the factory, those cars do not have any sort of resonators. It's really just headers back. Well, it's like headers into cats to the X pipe. And then at the very end, instead of having mufflers, they just have these tiny little cylinder resonators at the end, and that's it. Like there's no exhaust mode or anything like that. So when you hit that start button, it's just like I had these cars at my house in the wintertime, and I'd cold start in the morning, and like you just like feel buildings like vibrating around you, and it's just like there's like a certain
oh
point in the RPM range as it's shifting through gears, like 1800, 2000 RPM, something like that, where it gets way louder really quickly, where it's like, and like it's just because of that resonance inside of the exhaust system. Um, and don't get me wrong, at higher RPMs, it sounds great because it's just like anger and rage coming out of the end of that um, muffler tip. But I don't know. It's a lot to live with on a daily basis.
I was bought to bring back here to Sweden from the US because the Hellcat they never. So I test drove it in the US, and I mean those cars they were amazing. They were the last of the last. I mean, I'm sure the new model will have its own interesting points, but those cars were definitely like the last breed. Like, didn't they have like an E-Class chassis from the beginning too? Like,
Yeah, from the Daimler Chrysler merger of the late '90s, early
yeah,
2000s. I think the W210 E class was kind of shared with them because that 5 link rear end, suspension geometry. I think yeah, like the actual
yeah, because it's
platform.
independent rear
Well,
suspension, which is like when you look at the car, you're like, oh, it definitely has
yeah,
leaf springs. Like when you just visually look at it, it's the kind of car that would have
right.
in the past, but it totally
Yeah,
doesn't. It's
yeah.
fairly modern.
It's not just independent. It's like a multi-link 5 link rear end situation that's straight out of the E class. So yeah, no, and I think that's like something that automotive journalists and people that are typically into brands with a little bit more cachet than Dodge out there would have like you looked at the car and like saw something that's actually different than what it is. And I think retrospectively looking back at that car, it was cool that they made it for almost 20 years, because by the end, I think they're probably still for sale on some dealership lots here in the US. So if you're watching this and you want a classic great driving muscle car, maybe maybe go check it out. But it's kind of amazing that you know such a well refined platform was put into production, and then once Dodge got it, they're like, well, we've got a big V8, that we can supercharge, and yeah, and especially towards the end when they did the wide body where you got a lot more tire front and rear.
Oh yeah,
Well,
those
they
look
they
good.
handle so much better. I got to go out to a racing course in Arizona, which was like the factory Dodge SRT race school for like insurance purposes, basically, because I was driving these cars around the streets. So they're like, we want you to, have some training because these things have like 800 horsepower. They can handle and grip extremely well. If you, yeah, I was like, awesome, like race school, let's go. Um, yeah, which was an amazing experience. But the handling and nimbleness at speed on a track is actually pretty staggering, just because of how much tire they get. I mean, it's impressive. Um, yeah, I mean, it's not the most communicative car because it's heavy and it's kind of
Did you ever drive it with that manual transmission from the
yeah, yeah,
Viper?
yeah. It's a Tremec transmission. That's the
Yeah.
one they gave you the option at race school if you wanted a manual or the 8 speed.
Is it weird? I remember I drove it. It's like when you're in, is it first gear or reverse? You're like basically your hand is like hitting the dash because it's
Yeah.
like it's super low in there. It's like super short. I just remember it definitely wasn't like totally engineered to be in there. It was like, okay, what do we got? We'll throw this in
Yeah,
there.
no, it's you're right. I mean, it's a high performance transmission that a lot of like V8 muscle cars tend to get in like their
Isn't it the same
yeah,
one I
yeah, yeah.
had
Well,
in
I think
my
that
in the
the
GT350?
GT350
Because I had a Trimec as well. I thought it was the 600 I had in the GT350.
yeah, to be honest, I don't
Uh, I had the same one that's in the
yeah.
CO6 in the Corvette.
I to be honest, I don't not I'm not an expert on the Tremec transmission numbers. I think maybe the first year the GT350 had the T56. I think that sounds right. Um, and
T50. Oh yeah, maybe
they,
that's
they're
the one I
really
had.
they're really mechanical, like very notchy. Like you have to use a bit of force. And that was definitely true
Yeah, that's
in the
mine.
Challenger. First gear was just very hard to get it into. Like you kind of just had to like punch it towards the dashboard to get it to like that's just how you had to shift it in there. And the thing I remember the most about that, like the manual setup, was how stiff the clutch spring was. I mean, it, the the the
Oh
blend
yeah.
point zone was very tiny. The pedal travel was quite a lot, and the spring was just very very stiff. But it's a powerful car.
On
So
Yeah, on the GT350, that was the weird thing because a lot of people changed that spring out because it was too
yeah,
light on that car. But the Porsche now is super stiff. It's the stiffest car I've
hmm
had. And the manual is like what you said, especially when it's cold, when the fluid inside the transmission hasn't warmed up. Getting it to first gear is like you have to like really ram it in
yeah.
there.
Yeah, how do you feel about like the clutch pedal stiffness? Because I think when I'm in a performance car, I think I would rather it be on the stiffer side than super super light. When I drove the GT350, I also remembered thinking that the clutch actuation was a little bit you had to like finesse it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's the really nice thing with the Porsche as well is that it's wired, so you can actually feel the tension of the wire as you're using the clutch pedal. So that plus it's very stiff. It's easy to find once you know exactly where the grip point is on the clutch. It's kind of easy to remember it. It's kind of like muscle memory because you have this resistance, so it kind of helps with exactly where it
Yeah.
is. So you have that because with the GT350, it was too easy. Like you don't almost feel a difference that your foot is hardly
Yeah.
moved at all. Here, it's like you feel every angle of your foot, so you know where you need to be or where you need to come up to,
hmm
kind of thing. And it's the same with the gas pedal. Is also wired.
Amazing.
Like there's a you can actually feel a wire as you're,
Wow.
which is weird. I don't think I've actually had a car like
Yeah.
that.
It my
Because every car I've had is like, even my first Mazda, it was electronic. I thought, uh, so I'm so used to that. But here it's like, you really feel it. It's quite
Yeah,
amazing.
it is interesting, and I like that mechanical connection because, like you said, you know your feet and your ankles and your legs are all kind of like mechanical sensors or biological sensors that we have built in, and the more texture and uh, feedback you can get from those things, the more precisely you can operate them. And yeah, I think the E28
Hmm.
I think has a cable throttle linkage because you can like if you push it too fast you hear like a little squeak like it's like its age is starting to show. But yeah, you're talking about the Porsche. I think maybe like let's hear what's going on with your new car and maybe some of the things you've been up to with it, and then we can close up by talking about my latest crazy project that makes no sense.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about that too. So yeah, no, I took it on a. I've been just kind of checking it over, changing some of the older screws out. I mean, it is still a 2001, so it's an older car. It was sort of redone 2 years ago. A lot of stuff was done to it, major stuff. So, but it's just different screws and bolts and like rubber bushings and things like that. I've replaced as well on it. I changed the drop links in the front and the back, and then I changed the rear anti roll bar as
Okay,
well to a stiffer H&R,
I bet.
which is significant. The stock one is like 19 millimeters. This one is like 24,
Okay.
25. So changing the one on the back has really changed the
Hmm.
front. The drive-in point is so. I mean, it's even better now. It was already good before, but it's remarkable now. What else have I done? I mean, that's pretty much it. And then I just told myself that I was going to go and drive it for a while. So I drove almost 100 kilometers north, which is still in the south of Sweden. So 100,
I was
no,
gonna say 100 doesn't seem that far. Like,
thousand, no, 1,000. Sorry, 100 Swedish miles. 100 Swedish miles. 1 Swedish mile is 10.
oh, is that
So
a
a
thing? I
thousand.
didn't know that.
And it was kind of a triangle thing. And then I drove to Stockholm after that. I mean, the most remarkable thing is once you put it in sixth gear and you're like cruising on a highway. I mean, even if it's got fixed bucket seats from the RS model, actually from the 997, even if this is a 996, but it's got the 997 3.8 Porsche fixed bucket seats. But once you're in there, I mean, they're
Mm,
comfortable. It's a comfortable car to drive. It is a pain to get in and out of it. It's got a half cage in the back as well. But it is so nice once you get it cruising. Like when you're doing like somewhere between. It's crazy how when you start driving it, you realize what it was designed for, right? It was designed for Le Mans. I mean, it's not was designed for like a short race circuit. I mean, almost my Mini with the suspension upgrades and things I've done. I mean, that's quicker on turning on a point like on a small
hmm.
curvy road. But this thing, I mean, at like 140 to 100 and so like what is that? From 140, that's about 60. So let's say like from 65 miles an hour up until like 110 miles an hour, that car is just in its like
Hmm.
cruising. If you're in fifth gear, it's just it can do that for hours and hours and hours and hours. You just realize that it's just in a
Yeah,
sweet spot.
I know what you
The
mean.
crazy thing is I drove the whole thing like almost like, well, let's say it was maybe 2,000 uh, kilometers. And then I'm like following, how much gas I'm burning. And like when I'm on the highway, yeah, I do put it in sixth gear because there's just no point in, you're on there for a while. It doesn't have cruise control, by the way, because it's got this wire set up, right? So there's no way to electronically get that signal. At least Porsche didn't spend time figuring that out. So normally the 996, the regular models, have cruise control and all
Mm.
these things, but they don't have that for the GT3. But it turns out that I'm getting like 7 liters to 100 kilometers,
What?
which
That's
is
really
like
good.
imaginably good gas
Yeah,
mileage.
that's
Because once you're like cruising a sixth gear, it's just like it'll just
that's
do it
like that's
forever.
like Renault
I mean, most
Scenic
of the time I'm going
territory.
like
Like,
65.
you know,
Yeah, it is like crazy. And sure, yeah, if you get on it, you're more than you're at 10 or whatever on 100 kilometers. But if you really like get into sixth gear and you run it really efficiently, it is wild how efficient that engine
yeah.
is. and it just kind of chugs at like 60 miles an hour. It'll do that
Wow.
forever. So I calculated out that basically means that I have 1,000, and I tried this because on that trip it was almost 1,000 to my first location. Didn't have to fill it
Wow.
up,
That's amazing.
like because it's got a 70
Okay.
liter, uh, it's got a 70-liter fuel tank, which isn't. If it was a bigger car, it wouldn't be
Mhm.
that crazy. But the car only weighs 1,300
Yeah.
something kilos, right?
That's impressive.
So it, and it's probably fairly aerodynamic.
Well, you heard it here first, everyone. The 996 GT3 is a wonderful highway cruiser. Maybe look into how to retrofit cruise control if that's important to you. But that's amazing fuel economy. I'm really surprised to hear that actually.
Yeah, so it's a fun experiment. I mean, that's basically what I'm getting in the modern Volvo diesel.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I mean, not really because that's mixed driving versus highway
sure.
driving, but still, so they're not really like fair to compare. But even that it's in the same sphere, possibilities is
Yeah.
wild to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the things going against
Yeah.
the Volvo obviously would be the weight, all-wheel drive system, and then if you're taking short trips with a diesel engine, it takes a while to warm up, so you're not really getting good economy until it's warm. But
Hmm.
that is amazing. Like I said, I just wouldn't have expected that from a high-strung engine. But I guess, like you said, if the gearing is matching the speed limit that you're doing, and you're low enough in the rev range and being kind to your throttle pedal, then you can maximize your mileage. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was quite the news for me. So that
So
was good. Obviously, I don't get that on regular basis, but it was nice to know you could.
absolutely, yeah, that'll certainly make you want to take it on more trips as opposed to being like, oh, this is going to be like twice as expensive to drive
Yeah.
than the other car, whatever. Because that's a factor depending on where you're going. So yeah, very cool. I'm glad you're happy with the car. It sounds amazing, and I really hope I get to drive it someday soon.
Oh yeah, yeah. You need to come here and drive it. So, what is your the last topic we had today is your Siberian beast,
the
or how do
trans
you? Didn't Porsche make that
the trans
the Trans
Yeah,
Siberian expedition
yeah.
vehicles?
So I had either, depending on your viewpoint, a really great idea or a really terrible one. And in
A
Yeah,
great
well, I'm
idea.
I'm committing the YouTuber cardinal sin by buying the world's cheapest of a certain model. But yeah, last year I bought a 2006 Porsche Cayenne Turbo S for $3,000 US, which for a car that was somewhere north of $100,000 when it was new is quite a bargain. And yeah, I mean, this on paper the vehicle is impressive. Air suspension, 540 odd horsepower, 8,000 pound towing capacity, and I kind of had a need for something that can cope with not so great roads, maybe go off road a little bit, and also potentially do some hauling and towing and stuff like that. So I'd had my eyes out for a Cayenne for a while, and was kind of kicking around the idea of buying a cheap one and then like lifting it and turning it into an off road vehicle. Mileage wasn't super important because yeah, for the turbo engine, they're pretty reliable. The transmission's pretty reliable. It's really just kind of like wear and tear on the suspension and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I'm going to replace all that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, one popped up, and this thing it's seen a lot in its lifetime. Yeah, it's got 150,000 miles on it, and the underside is rusty and stuff like that. And of course, when you leave it sit for a while, the air suspension falls down, and it's been in a minor front end accident. So the front bumper cover has been replaced with a non-turbo bumper cover, and like one of the headlights kind of like wobbles if you jiggle it. It's like just being held in with a zip tie. So I don't know. This was a bad idea, but yeah, no. The past couple of weeks, I've stripped off all of the original suspension. I pulled the air springs out because my plan is to delete that system, just to make it a little bit more reliable and robust for all road um, driving. Even though I have to say, I think the factory air spring system in that car is really pretty robust. It doesn't seem like a lot of people have issues with the bags themselves actually failing. It's usually just more like a controller, airline, minor leak on the fittings sort of situation. But because I wanted to lift the car, it's just a lot easier if you use coil springs and pads. So yeah, pull the springs out.
What are you going
What's that?
with? What coils are you going with? What coil overs are you going with?
I'm doing everything for this build on the budget. So I'm not gonna throw like super super fancy coilovers into it because it would immediately be more than the cost of the car. So
Yeah. No,
I
I
I
could
got
easily
a
spin out.
conversion kit from a company that makes specifically like a coil and strut assembly that already has the top mount like already bolted together, from a place called Suncoast Industries, and the entire set was like $500. So remains to be
Hmm.
seen how they do quality wise, but I'm gonna start with this, and at least this way, if the struts fail quickly or something goes wrong, um, I can easily and cheaply switch out the actual strut assembly with like OEM Porsche or something else, another aftermarket brand.
Hmm.
But this gives me a start. Like I'm gonna have to do a like shakedown test of this thing when and if it ever gets back on the road. But yeah, I started replacing control arms and sway bar links and all of that stuff. It's mostly bolted back together right now, but I'm waiting on a couple of like eccentric camber adjustment bolts that go into the rear lower control arm where it attaches to the hub. Because I essentially had to sawzall those off of the car. Like there was no way, like with the space constraint and like banging this bolt out with a hammer, it quickly became apparent that it was basically like fused to the inside and sleeve, metal sleeve of the bushing. So yeah, I just ended up
You just had like gold raining down.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about this build that makes any sense really, other than like the final vision of having you know a, a powerful and capable vehicle that I can drive anywhere in bad weather. Can take these Detroit roads with you know without getting obsessed.
It's an iconic car, though.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's an iconic car. I mean, the that and the original X5, I think, are, you know, I mean, they were unique challenges to get a, sports car brand to do an
yeah,
SUV.
and they certainly.
I mean, I think they hit a home run with the design for
Yeah,
sure.
I think they did well too. I think when these cars came out, they were super polarizing because, people see a BMW SUV or a Porsche SUV, they're like, no, Porsche makes 911s, they make sports cars, they make race cars, not, something for people to go to the mall with their family. But no, I mean, it was something that saved the brand at that time, really, and is still, their vast money makers are still their SUVs, essentially the Cayenne and the Cayman.
But this is Mach 1,
Yeah,
right?
this is the
This is Mach
first
1.
generation. So um,
So it's got the same headlights as mine, the fried egg kind of
basically,
headlights, like boxer headlights, whatever.
yeah. If
Yeah.
you look at the car from the headlights up, it does kind of have like the 911 shape on the top of it, minus the rear doors and that sort of thing. But like the curves are similar.
Yeah, I think they were really successful with the Cayenne. I think they were not so successful with the first
I
Panamera.
agree. I think the first Panamera was always a little ugly to me, and I heard a friend say it kind of looks like a greyhound dog taking a poop, and I can't unsee that now. Like, sorry for the graphic image, but like if you look at the side profile of it, it's like,
Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
terrible. It's terrible. That is a good
yeah.
description. It's graphic
Yeah, I
but
think the
good.
second generation they've
So
made it look a lot better, and they've kind of taken that design and applied that to the Taycan, and I think that that car is quite good looking. So they've figured some things out, but but
mhm.
yeah, my goal is to have this Cayenne on the road next month, which is, well, yeah, we're a couple of days away, but like a couple of weeks in, I'd like to take a trip to the western side of Michigan, and there's a big off-road vehicle park called Silver Lake, which is just basically dunes on Lake Michigan that people take their quads and dirt bikes and
Oh,
off-roaders on.
cool.
And I have a friend that wants to meet up there, and you know, give this Porsche Cayenne a shakedown. So it's going to be a little bit of a push
That's
in the
awesome.
next couple of weeks to get it just like roadworthy and and all of that stuff. But it's been fun. It's been frustrating. It's been a lot of things, but um, that's working on cars for you. So yeah,
For
I think
sure.
that's everything we wanted to go over today, and more probably. We'll see you guys next time
Yeah.
we get together. We're going to be talking more about F1 again, getting back into what's been going on since the summer break has come back. Um, Hopefully, recapping what happened in this weekend's race in Monza as well. So definitely stay tuned. Thank you for joining us and supporting the channel. Um, and yeah, Hans, anything you want to say before we close it out?
No, no, no. It's great catching up, and look forward to Monza as well.
Absolutely.
So take care. Thanks for
Yeah.
tuning in.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks.
All right, cheers. Take care. Bye.